Beyond the Veil, exploring near-death experiences. Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Whispers of the Unknown, a podcast where we dive into the mysteries that linger at the edges of life. I'm your host, and tonight we are embarking on a journey that's both haunting and comforting, a 20-minute exploration of near-death experiences or NDEs. These are profound moments where people on the brink of death claim to glimpse what lies beyond. We will explore real stories of those who have survived clinical death, look at scientific studies and tests that probe the credibility of these experiences, and even touch on the surprising confession from a neurologist who admitted to fabricating his NDE story. So settle in, dim the lights, and let's step beyond of the veil together. Let's define what a near-death experience is. An NDE typically happens during a life-threatening event like a cardiac arrest, a severe accident, or a near drowning, where a person is clinically dead, meaning the heart stops and brain activity ceases. Yet, when they are revived, many report vivid, often life-changing experiences. About 1 in 10 people who survive cardiac arrest in the hospital setting report an NDE, according to research by neurologist Kevin Nelson. These experiences often share common elements: a sense of peace, out-of-body experiences, seeing a bright light, or encountering deceased loved ones. But are these visions real, or just tricks of a dying brain? Let's dig into the stories and the science. Let's start with the story of Thomas Bennett, a fisherman from Maine who in 1998 faced a terrifying near-death experience. Thomas was out of his boat during a storm when a massive wave capsized it, pulling him into the icy waters. His heart stopped, and he was clinically dead for several minutes before being rescued. When he awoke in the hospital, he recounted a vivid journey. Thomas described standing on a shimmering white shore, the sand like crushed pearls beneath his feet. The water was deep, endless blue, so still it looked like glass. He felt an overwhelming peace, as if all his fears had melted away. In the distance, he saw a golden light that pulsed gently, drawing him closer. As he approached, a woman appeared, her face both familiar and strange, her eyes holding a depth that seemed to see his entire life. She spoke to him in a voice like a lullaby, saying, "You are not supposed to be here yet." She showed him visions of his life, his childhood with his wife Clara, his daughter's first steps, and then scenes of strangers, all connected in a web of light. But then a shadow appeared, a void of darkness showing flashes of pain and sorrow. Thomas felt fear for the first time, but the woman reassured him, "You don't have to choose the shadow." He was given a choice: stay in this peaceful realm or return to his family. Before he could decide, he felt a jolt, and he awoke in the hospital with Clara by his side. Thomas's story is one of many that describe a realm beyond our own, filled with light, peace, and sometimes a choice to return. But what makes the stories credible? Let's look at the scientific studies and tests on NDE credibility. Researchers have been studying NDEs for decades, trying to determine if they are real glimpses of an afterlife or just hallucinations of a dying brain. One of the most significant studies is the AWARE study led by Dr. Sam Parnia in 2008. This large-scale project involved 2,060 cardiac arrest patients across 15 hospitals in the UK, United States, and Austria. The goal was to examine mental experiences during clinical death and test the validity of out-of-body experiences, OBEs, using objective markers. In the AWARE study, researchers placed visual targets like pictures or symbols on suspended boards near the ceilings of hospitals' rooms where patients were likely to be resuscitated. These targets were only visible from above, not from the floor, to test if patients who claimed to have OBEs could accurately report seeing them. Of the 2,060 patients, 39% who survived and were interviewed report some awareness during their clinical death, but only 9% had experiences classified as NDEs. Out of those 2%, reported full awareness with OBEs, including seeing and hearing events. One patient even correctly recalled hearing the names of fruits played through headphones during his cardiac arrest, like apple, pear, banana, despite being clinically dead at the time. However, none of the patients reported seeing the visual targets, which left researchers like Dr. Parnia with mixed conclusions. He noted that consciousness seemed to persist during a 3-minute period without a heartbeat, challenging the idea that the brain stops functioning entirely within 20-30 seconds of cardiac arrest. Another notable study comes from cardiologist Pim van Lommel, who in 2001 examined 344 cardiac arrest survivors in 10 Dutch hospitals. Of these, 18% reported NDEs, with 12% describing core experiences like OBEs or seeing a light. Van Lommel's team also conducted a longitudinal study comparing NDE survivors to those who didn't have NDEs at 2 and 8 years post-event. They found that NDE survivors were more likely to have reduced fear of death, increased belief in an afterlife, and became more loving and empathetic, changes that persisted over time. The studies suggest that NDEs may not be mere hallucinations, but they are not conclusive proof of an afterlife either. Critics, like neurologist Kevin Nelson, argue that NDEs could be linked to brain activity such as REM sleep intrusion, a condition where a dream-like states blend into wakefulness. Nelson research shows that the people prone to REM intrusion are more likely to report NDEs, suggesting a neurological basis, yet the debate continues, especially when we consider stories that challenge scientific explanation, like blind woman. One of the most compelling NDEs cases involves a blind woman, as documented by psychiatrist Brian Weiss in a peer-reviewed study. This elderly woman, blind from birth, suffered a cardiac arrest while in the hospital, where Weiss was the chairman of the psychiatry department during resuscitation. She reported floating out of her body and standing near the window, watching the team work on her. She described, without any pain, how they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. What makes her story remarkable is that she, a woman who had never seen in her life, described visual details accurately, details confirmed by the hospital staff present. She saw the room's layout, the actions of the doctors, and even the view outside the window. This aligns with research by Dr. Kenneth Ring, who studied 31 blinds of visually impaired individuals who had NDEs. Of the 14 who were blind from birth, 9 described vivid visual experiences during their NDEs. consistent with typical NDE's features like seeing light or deceased relatives. These cases challenge the idea that NDEs are just brain-based hallucinations, as blind individuals shouldn't be able to form visual memories, yet their accounts are often verified as accurate. Another famous case is that of Pam Reynolds, a patient who underwent a complex brain surgery in 1991. During the procedure, her body was cooled to 60 Fahrenheit, her heartbeat and the breathing were stopped, and her brain activity ceased. Clinical death. Yet Pam later described an out-of-body experience where she floated above her body and watched the surgery. She accurately recalled the doctor's conversations, including a discussion about the veins on her leg, and they described the bone saw used during the procedure, which she linked to an electric toothbrush, a detail later confirmed by cardiologist Michael Sabom, who revived her medical records. Pam also heard the song Hotel California playing in the operating room, despite her ears were plugged and her eyes taped shut. These details, verified by the surgical team, are what researchers call veridical perceptions. Veridical perceptions information when the patient couldn't have known through normal sensory means. Such cases are part of why Dr. Janice Miner-Holden has studied veridical NDE reports, noting that they often involve accurate observations during clinical coma, far beyond what the brain should be capable of. The neurologist confession, Eben Alexander's fabricated story. Not all NDE stories hold up under scrutiny, and one high-profile case shocked the research community. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, published a best-selling book in 2012 called Proof of Heaven, detailing his NDE during a 7-day coma caused by bacterial meningitis. Alexander claimed that while his brain was completely shut down, he traveled to a heavenly realm, met angels, and saw a mysterious woman who he later discovered was his sister he would never met. He argued that his experience proved the soul could exist outside the body, as his brain was too compromised to produce such vivid visions. However, in 2013, an investigative article in Esquire magazine revealed discrepancies in Alexander's account. The article questioned his claim that his brain was entirely non-functional during the NDE, pointing out inconsistencies in his medical records and timeline. Alexander hadn't published his findings in peer-reviewed journals, and neurologist Oliver Sacks called his claims anti-science. Eventually, Alexander admitted that part of his story were fabricated, acknowledging that he would embellish details to make the narrative more compelling for his book. This confession highlighted the importance of rigorous, peer-reviewed research in the field of NDE studies, as anecdotal accounts can sometimes be misleading. What people see during clinical death. So, what do people see during clinical death? Across thousands of accounts, certain patterns emerge. Many, like Thomas Benev, describe a sense of peace and detachments from their body, often floating above it, in and out of body experience. Pam saw the operating room from above, observing details she couldn't have known. Others report a tunnel leading to a bright light, as described in studies by Dr. Raymond, who identified a common stages like peace, detachment, and entering a realm of light. Some see deceased relatives, Thomas met a woman he felt he knew, and many NDEers, as noted by Dr. Bruce Grayson, encounter loved ones they would never met in life, later identifying them through photos. The blind woman saw the hospital room and the resuscitation team despite never having seen anything before. Others, like those in Pin Van Lommel's study, report a live review, seeing their entire life flash before them, feeling every emotion intensely. A smaller group experiences distressing NDEs, seeing dark, voids or hellish imagery. As noted in 2019 study by Charlotte Marshall, where 14% of 123 NDEers reported negative experiences. What does it all mean as we near the end of our journey? The question remains, what do these experiences mean? Are they glimpses of an afterlife, as Thomas and Pam believed, or are they the brain's final attempt to make sense of death, as skeptics like Kevin Nelson suggests? The Award study and others show that consciousness may persist longer than we thought, but we are still far from a definitive answer. The stories of blind individuals seeing and veridical perceptions like Pam's challenge purely neurological explanation. Yet, cases like Eben Alexander's remind us to approach the stories with caution. What's clear is that NDEs change lives. Survivors often return with less fear of death, a deeper sense of purpose, and a belief in something greater, something Thomas felt as he sat by the window years later, listening for the hum of that distant shore. As you drift off tonight, let this story linger in your mind. What lies beyond the veil, and what would you see if you crossed it? Thank you for joining me on this journey through the unknown. If you have had your own NDE, I would love you to share your story in the comments. Until next time, sleep well and may your dreams be filled with light. Good night.